Here are the 12 major scales. They all have 7 different notes on the 7 degrees of the scale. When we learn how to play these scales, we start on the root of the scale, which is on the 1st degree, and we end on the root. But this is not the only way that we can play scales. To play the relative minor scale, we simply play the same notes of the major scale, but we start and end on the 6th degree of the scale. However, there are 5 more degrees that we can start and end the scale on. When we arrange a particular scale in this way, we create a set of 7 scales called modes, and each will have its own name. Let's look at the modes of the C major scale. The mode that starts on the root is just the major scale, but it also goes by another name, the Ionian scale. So here is the C Ionian scale, or mode. The scale that starts on the 2nd degree is called the Dorian mode, so here is D Dorian. We call it D Dorian because the scale starts on D, and D is the 2nd degree of the scale that we are using. So if the scale starts on the 2nd degree, then it is a Dorian scale that we are referring to. The scale on the 3rd degree is the Phrygian mode, so here is E Phrygian. The scale on the 4th degree is called the Lydian mode, so here is F Lydian. The scale that starts on the 5th degree is the Mixolydian mode, so here is G Mixolydian. The scale that starts on the 6th degree is the Aeolian scale, so here is A Aeolian. And the scale that starts on the 7th degree is the Locrian mode, so here is B Locrian. These are the names given to the various modes or scales, and it's not limited to just major scales. All types of scales will have their own modes. If you learn all these modes, 7 modes to each major scale, then it may help you when improvising. Let's look at the song All the Things You Are. If you want to see a full analysis of this song, you can watch my video on it. This is just the first section of the song, but what is said here will apply to all sections. The first section has 2 keys. It starts with a 6-2-5-1-4 progression in the key of A flat major, and then a 5-1 in the key of C. If you're not sure what that means, then you could watch my video on the analysis of this song. When improvising of this song, if we know the key changes, then we know what notes will sound good over the chords. So in this case, we can play the notes of the A flat major over the first 5 chords since they all come from the key of A flat major. And we can use the notes of the C major scale for the last 2 chords since the song changes to the key of C major. This song goes through several key changes, some of which is ambiguous, with several different interpretations of what is going on. However, if you're not good at analysing a song, we could approach the song in a different way, and instead of relying on the key to tell us what notes to play, we can treat each chord as a separate entity and play the appropriate mode or scale over it. And in that way, we do not need to analyse the song before improvising over it. You may have heard musicians talk about using a Dorian, Mixolydian or Ionian scale over a 2-5-1 progression. The benefit of using this approach is seen when improvising over chord progressions of complex songs that have lots of key changes. Let's look at what modes are available to us using the example of a 2-5-1 progression in the key of C. The reason why we can use scales over certain chords is because the scales contain the chord notes and therefore will sound good when played over the chord. The notes of the D minor 7 chord can only be found in the C major scale, the F major scale and the B flat major scale. So all these scales can be used over the D minor 7 chord. If we rearrange these scales so that they start and end on the root of the D minor 7, that is on the D note, then what we have is the C major scale starting and ending on the 2nd degree, so D Dorian. We have the F major scale starting and ending on the 6th degree, D Aeolian. And lastly, we have the B flat major scale starting and ending on the 3rd degree, so D Phrygian. So we have 3 modes that we can use over the D minor 7 chord. Players will usually use the Dorian or Aeolian modes. The Phrygian mode can cause some problems as it may clash with other notes and therefore is mainly used over a 3 chord in a progression. The notes of the G7 chord can only be found in the C major scale. So if we rearrange that scale to start on the G note, we have the C major scale starting and ending on the 5th degree, so G Mixolydian. There is only one mode for the dominant chord. However, in reality, when improvising over a dominant chord, because the chord is dissonant and creates tension, any scale that has its guide tones, the 3rd and 7th note of the chord, can be played over it. And as such, the dominant chord has the most scale options. Here are just a few of them. The notes of the C major 7 chord are found in the C major scale and the G major scale. So rearranging these scales, we get the C Ionian scale and the C Lydian scale, that is the G major scale starting on the 4th degree. So to recap, any minor 7th chord will have 3 choices of modes: the Dorian mode, the Phrygian mode and the Aeolian mode, but the Phrygian mode can cause problems. The dominant chord has only one mode, the Mixolydian, but there are lots of other scales that can be used over this chord to add more or less tension and interest. The major 7th chord has 2 modes, the Ionian and the Lydian modes. The other chord naturally found in the scale is the half diminished chord, and the Locrian mode is used for that. So let's go back to our song and write down the available modes. You should now be able to identify the names of the modes available for each chord by matching it to the root name and the type of chord. The difficulty comes in knowing what scale the mode is taken from. Let's look at the first chord. We have F Dorian, so we want to know what major scale we would use when playing F Dorian. Ask yourself the question, what scale has F on its 2nd degree? The answer is E flat major. So we would use the E flat major scale starting and ending on F. This will give us the F Dorian scale. We also have F Phrygian. Well, D flat major has F on its 3rd degree. And lastly, we have F Aeolian. And A flat major has F on its 6th degree. Trying to work out these major scales can be time consuming if you're not familiar with playing the scales on different degrees. So if you're going to use this approach for improvisation, you will have to learn these modes by heart and be able to play them instantly. Now let's try to create a melody for this song using these modes. I've removed the Phrygian modes as they do not fall on the 3 chord in the progression. I've chosen these modes and the whole tone scale over the first dominant chord to create some interest. You can watch my video on the whole tone scale if you want to. First we want a rhythm, and then we can use those notes of the various modes on that rhythm. The rhythm is something that we will come up with in our heads based on the music that we listen to and how creative we are. But I'm just going to lift it from another song and see if it works. So here are some parts of the rhythm from Charlie Parker's Kim. I took some chunks of the rhythm and put it together. So if you're not good at coming up with ideas for good rhythm, then you can just take it from a song that you listen to. Now I'm going to put the notes of the various modes to this rhythm. So in conclusion, if you know the key changes to the song, you could play the notes of the scale of those keys. Alternatively, you could treat all the chords separately as if they are not part of a harmony and use the notes of the chosen modes. Some modes will create more tension than others as they have more notes outside of the key. The modes that you choose is up to you and what sound you're looking for and whether you want to stay within the harmony or venture out of it. Well, I hope you found this short video on modes helpful and informative, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye.